Have you ever felt powerless? What if I told you the secret to unbreakable freedom was discovered by a man who owned nothing, not even his own name? In the vast, brutal theater of the Roman Empire, power was the only game that mattered. It was the currency of emperors, the driving obsession of senators, and the deepest daydream of every legionary soldier marching under the sun. To be powerful was to command armies, to own territories that spanned the known world, to decide a man's fate with a simple, lazy nod, and to be powerless. Well, that was to be a slave. It meant you were not a person, but a piece of property, a thing to be used, to be broken, and when no longer useful, to be thrown away without a second thought. And yet, in this world, so completely defined by brute force and the sword, one of the most enduring and powerful legacies would come not from a man seated on a golden throne, but from a man bound in iron chains. He was a slave, a cripple, a person whose very name was not a name at all, but a label that meant acquired. His body, every muscle and bone, belonged to another man. But his mind? His mind was a fortress that no army on earth could ever hope to conquer. This is the story of how a man who had absolutely nothing discovered a freedom richer and more profound than any emperor could ever imagine. This is the story of Epictetus, and it is immortalized in a moment of shocking defiance. He was owned by a powerful and reportedly cruel man in Rome. One day, his master, in a fit of sadistic rage, grabbed his slave's leg and began to twist it. As the pressure mounted, as the bone itself must have been screaming out under the strain, the slave didn't cry out. He didn't beg for mercy. He didn't plead. Instead, he simply looked up calmly at his torturer and issued a quiet, unnerving warning. You're going to break it. His master, infuriated by this insane lack of fear, by this refusal to be psychologically broken, twisted harder. And when the bone finally, sickeningly, snapped, the slave's only response, delivered without a single hint of self-pity or agony, was, "See, didn't I tell you it would break?" That one moment, forged in excruciating pain, revealed a kind of power that no chains could ever hold, and no master could ever dominate. It was the birth of a philosophy forged in fire, and it would make the slave, Epictetus, one of the most influential thinkers in all of human history. From slave to philosopher, who was Epictetus? To truly grasp the sheer, radical brilliance of Epictetus's mind, you have to first understand the profound brutality of the world that created him. He was born around the year 50 AD in Hierapolis, a city in what we now call Turkey. We don't even know his real name. The name he is known by, Epictetus, isn't a name at all. It's just a Greek label. It simply means gained or acquired. From the moment he drew breath, he wasn't considered a person. He was a possession. And he was acquired by a man of considerable and dangerous influence, Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus was a fascinating and terrifying figure in his own right. Former slave who had somehow survived the deadly politics of the imperial court, climbing the ladder to become the administrative secretary for the infamous Emperor Nero. This placed young Epictetus in a very strange and precarious position. He was on the absolute bottom rung of the Roman social ladder, a slave, yet he lived and served in the household of a man who whispered directly into the ear of the most powerful and unstable person on the planet. This gave him a front-row seat to the raw paranoia, the deadly whims, and the suffocating cruelty of Nero's court. He saw powerful men dripping with gold and titles, tremble in absolute fear at the emperor's bad moods. He watched as fortunes were made and lost in an instant, as lives were extinguished on a whim. This ordinary world for Epictetus was a world of chains, constant violence, and the quiet observation of a system built on a fragile, terrifying lie. Life as a slave was life without a voice, without a choice. Your day was not your own. Your body was not your own. Your very will belonged to your master, who, under Roman law, could beat you, brand you, or even kill you with little to no consequence. And by all accounts, Epictetus was a brutal master. This was the environment where Epictetus grew up, a world of constant, simmering threat. Eventually, the political tides in Rome turned. In 68 AD, Nero's reign of terror ended in his own death, and his secretary Epictetus, who had been too close to the fallen emperor, fell from favor. He was later executed by the new emperor, Domitian. Around this same time, through circumstances lost to history, Epictetus was granted his freedom. The man who was once property was now, legally at least, a free man. But for Epictetus, this was merely a change in his external status. He had already discovered true freedom years before. He began to teach philosophy in Rome, sharing the wisdom he had hammered into shape on the anvil of his own suffering. But his journey wasn't over. Around 93 AD, the same paranoid Emperor Domitian, who had executed his old master, banished all philosophers from Rome, seeing their independent thought as a political threat. So what does a man whose entire philosophy is about accepting what you can't control do when an emperor kicks him out of town? He doesn't complain. He doesn't despair. He simply moves. Epictetus relocated to Nicopolis, a city in western Greece, and there he founded a new school. And it was here, far from the center of power, that his influence would explode, attracting the brightest minds from across the empire and ensuring his words would never be forgotten. What made him so different? Epictetus was a ghost in the Roman machine. In a society utterly obsessed with externals, he was an anomaly. A Roman citizen's identity was everything they owned and everything people thought of them. It was their family name, their political rank, their wealth, their reputation, their military honors. It was all about the outward display of power and status. Epictetus had none of that. By every Roman standard, he was a nobody, an invisible tool. He had no name, no status, no property, no rights. But it was precisely this, being systematically stripped of everything the world values, that forced him to look inward for his worth. It was from the very bottom of society that he gained a perspective no one at the top could ever achieve. He learned a fundamental lesson right in the heart of the empire. All the things people desperately chase, power, wealth, fame, reputation, are incredibly fragile. They can be taken from you at any moment. He could see it with his own eyes. He saw his powerful master, Epictetus, living in constant fear, essentially a slave to the whims of Emperor Nero. And he could see that Nero, the emperor of the entire known world, was himself a miserable slave to his own uncontrollable appetites, his paranoia, and his desperate need for approval. From the very bottom, Epictetus started to see a different kind of power, a different kind of freedom. And this is what made him so strange. While everyone else was looking outside themselves for validation, he was looking inside. Think again of that horrifying moment with his leg. His master, Epictetus, was asserting his total, absolute power in the most Roman way imaginable, through physical violence. He was demonstrating, I own you. Your body is mine to do with as I please. Your pain is my entertainment. A normal response would be to scream, to beg, to curse, to show terror. That is the response the master expected. It would have confirmed his power. But Epictetus refused to play the part. His calm, detached warning, if you continue, you will break it, wasn't a plea. It was a statement of fact, as if he were an outside observer. It was profoundly unnerving. It was as if he was saying, this thing you are doing is happening to my leg, but it is not happening to me. You cannot touch my true self. When the bone snapped, his follow-up, did I not tell you that you would break it? Was the ultimate checkmate. In that moment, who was truly the slave? The master, who was so enslaved by his own rage that he had to resort to torturing a helpless man to feel powerful? Or the slave, who in the midst of blinding agony refused to surrender his inner peace and dignity? Epictetus's reaction was so alien to the Roman mindset that it bordered on supernatural. It revealed that he was operating on a completely different set of rules, drawing from a power source they didn't even know existed. His strangeness was his strength. He was a man who had found a loophole in the logic of suffering. The life-changing philosophy Epictetus discovered. In the grim and unforgiving world of Roman slavery, an education was a luxury you couldn't even dream of. But then, in an act that would change the course of Western philosophy, something amazing happened. For reasons we will never know for sure, perhaps Epictetus saw a spark of incredible genius in his young slave, or perhaps it was just a passing whim to show off his own culture. He allowed Epictetus to study philosophy. This was the moment that lit the fuse. And the teacher wasn't just any instructor. He was Gaius Musonius Rufus, one of the most respected, most courageous Stoic philosophers in all of Rome. Musonius was known as the Roman Socrates, a man of such unshakable integrity that Emperor Nero himself had seen him as a threat and had exiled him. For Epictetus, walking into Musonius's lectures must have felt like stepping out of a dark, suffocating cell and into the clean, open air. Here, the talk wasn't of masters and slaves, of power and submission. It was of reason, virtue, and character. Musonius taught that philosophy was not some abstract game for wealthy men to debate over dinner. It was a practical guide, a gritty, hands-on art for dealing with hardship and finding inner tranquility. It was a toolkit for living a good life, no matter who you were or what your circumstances were. Imagine what this crippled slave boy heard in those lectures. He heard that true wealth isn't in your bank account, but in a mind that cannot be disturbed by fortune. He heard that the goal of life wasn't pleasure or status, but living in agreement with nature, with virtue. Most importantly, he heard Musonius teach the core Stoic principle that you do and think your way to being a good person. You practice your way there. You have to train your character with the same discipline and dedication that an athlete trains their body. This was the message that struck Epictetus right where he lived. His entire life was a laboratory for suffering, and Musonius had just handed him the instruction manual. The seed of Stoicism was planted, and it took deep root in this fertile ground. From these teachings, Epictetus forged his central, life-altering philosophy. He boiled it all down into one stunningly simple but revolutionary idea, which we now call the dichotomy of control. He famously wrote, "Some things are up to us, and some are not." That's it. That's the starting line for all of it. So what is up to us? Only our own minds. Our opinions, our choices, our judgments, our desires, our aversions. Basically, anything that is our own direct doing. And what's not up to us? It's everything else. Our body, whether it is healthy or sick, strong or weak. Our property and our wealth. Our reputation and what other people think of us. Our position in society. Basically, anything that is not our own doing. Anything that can be affected by luck or by other people. It sounds simple, but it is a complete rewiring of how to live. The entire world, then and now, is built on the foundation of human misery, trying to control the uncontrollable. We are desperate to control what people think of us. We are terrified of losing our health or our money. We tie our happiness to the outcome of events. Epictetus realized that this is the root cause of all our anxiety, fear, and suffering. When we chain our happiness to things outside our direct control, we make ourselves fragile. We willingly become slaves to luck and circumstance. The broken leg was the ultimate proof. He couldn't control his master's rage. He couldn't control the strength of his own bone. If his peace of mind depended on his leg staying intact, he would have been psychologically destroyed. But he had placed his peace of mind somewhere else entirely, in his own will, in his power to choose his response. He chose to endure it with courage and without hatred. And in doing so, he kept the only thing that truly mattered safe, his own character. This was his great discovery. Your inner citadel, your power of choice, can never be conquered by anyone or anything unless you allow it to be. Why his wisdom still shapes our world today. A philosophy is just a collection of nice-sounding ideas until it actually changes a life. Epictetus's philosophy, born from the depths of powerlessness, would go on to shape one of the most powerful lives in all of history. His ideas were resurrected centuries later in the mind of a Roman emperor. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled the Roman Empire from 161 to 180 AD, never met Epictetus. The old slave was likely dead by the time Marcus was a young boy. But the slave's words became the emperor's most trusted guide. In his personal journal, which we now know as the immortal classic, The Meditations, Marcus actually thanks one of his tutors for loaning him a personal copy of Epictetus' lecture notes, compiled by his student Arrian. This wasn't just some casual reading material for the emperor. It was a lifeline. Marcus Aurelius was the ruler of a vast and chaotic empire. He was constantly dealing with brutal wars on the frontier, a devastating plague that swept through the population, betrayals from his closest allies, and the endless, crushing weight of political responsibility. In the words of the lame slave from a forgotten town, the emperor found the mental tools to keep his sanity and his soul intact. The influence of Epictetus is everywhere in his writing. When Marcus tells himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," realize this, and you will find strength that is pure, undiluted Epictetus. When he writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way," he is directly channeling the lesson Epictetus embodied with his own broken leg, that obstacles are not just things to be overcome, but opportunities for virtue. The most powerful man in the world, sitting in a cold tent on the German frontier, was having a conversation across time with a man who used to be legally classified as property. It's a stunning testament to the idea that true wisdom can be more powerful than an army. And the influence doesn't stop in ancient Rome. It echoes all the way down to our own time. His core idea, the distinction between what we can and can't control, is the absolute bedrock of one of the most successful modern psychological treatments, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. The entire practice of CBT is built on the Epictetan principle that it's not events that upset us, but our judgments about those events. A modern therapist helping a patient reframe their negative thoughts into more rational and productive ones is, in essence, practicing a discipline taught by a former slave 2,000 years ago. Perhaps the most dramatic modern example of his legacy is Vice Admiral James Stockdale. In 1965, his plane was shot down over North Vietnam. As he parachuted from his cockpit into enemy territory, about to be captured, he whispered to himself, "I am leaving the world of technology and entering the world of Epictetus." Stockdale had studied Epictetus at Stanford University. For the next 7.5 years, he was a prisoner of war in the infamous Hanoi Hilton prison camp. He was tortured over 15 times, spent 4 years in solitary confinement, and was held in leg irons for 2 years. He later said that it was the teachings of the slave philosopher that allowed him not only to survive, but to lead his fellow prisoners with courage and dignity. He understood that while his captors controlled his body, his environment, and his world, they could not control his will, his character, or his choice to resist. His inner freedom was untouchable. From a Roman emperor managing a plague, to a modern therapist helping a patient with anxiety, to a captured soldier surviving a torture camp, the wisdom of the slave who became a philosopher is still a source of incredible life-saving strength. Turning Epictetus's teachings into your superpower. The story of Epictetus starts in darkness, with chains and the sound of a snapping bone. But it ends with an elixir, a timeless truth, a powerful medicine he brought back from the depths of his suffering for all of us to use. So how do we actually apply it in our own lives, in a world of deadlines, traffic jams, and social media notifications? It begins by accepting his central, life-changing idea. Our happiness and our freedom do not depend on our circumstances. They depend entirely on our choices. We spend most of our lives frantically chasing things we believe will finally make us happy. We chase a better salary, a bigger house, more status, more power. We are conditioned to think, if I can just get that promotion, or find that perfect partner, or lose those 20 pounds, or fix that one nagging problem, then I'll finally have peace. Epictetus holds up his entire life as a giant stop sign and shows us that this is a fundamental, tragic mistake. He had nothing the world valued. He was a slave, a cripple, an exile. By any normal metric, his life was an absolute disaster. And yet, he found a peace and a strength that emperors envied. The practical application is to stop looking for freedom in the wrong place. Real freedom is an inside job. Here's how you can start. The next time something happens that upsets you, you get a rude email, someone cuts you off in traffic, you get bad news, stop and think. Before you react, just pause and ask yourself Epictetus's one critical question. Is this something that is up to me or not up to me? Is the content of that rude email up to you? No. Is the behavior of that other driver up to you? No. Is the existence of the bad news up to you? No. These are external events. They are, in his famous words, nothing to you. What is up to you? Your choice of how to respond. You can respond with rage, with anxiety, with despair. Or you can choose to respond with calm, with reason, with grace. That choice is your sacred, untouchable power. The second step is to view every difficulty not as a roadblock, but as a training partner. Epictetus would say that life is like a gymnasium, and problems are our sparring partners, sent to make us stronger. When you face a difficult project at work, a conflict with a loved one, or a personal setback, don't say, "Why is this happening to me?" Ask, what virtues can this situation help me practice? Can it help me practice patience, courage, forgiveness, resilience? As Marcus Aurelius would later write, the obstacle becomes the way. You can start to build your own inner fortress, brick by brick, by practicing this every single day. Train yourself to not hand over the keys to your mind. As Epictetus would scold his students, you'll hand over your mind to any random person who comes along and insults you, letting it get troubled and disturbed. Aren't you ashamed of that? The big question, could you live like him? The story of the slave who became famous isn't just a piece of ancient history. It's a direct and profound challenge to each and every one of us. It asks you to take a hard, honest look at your own life. Where have you changed your happiness? To things you can actually control, or to things you can't? Are you the master of your own mind, or are you a slave to your moods, your anxieties, and the opinions of others? Epictetus offers a path to a peace that can't be shaken, a fortress of the mind that can withstand any storm. But it is not an easy path. It requires discipline, practice, and a radical reevaluation of what truly matters. So here is the final challenge. Could you do it? Could you truly live like Epictetus in a world that screams for more? More comfort, more validation, more security? Could you find contentment within yourself? Could you face loss, criticism, or failure and see it not as a catastrophe, but simply as an external event, nothing to you? It is easy to admire his strength from a safe distance, but far harder to emulate it in our own lives. Yet, his life stands as a permanent testament to his most powerful and liberating teaching. Circumstances don't make the person. They only reveal that person to themselves. If this story resonated with you, help us grow this community of thinkers by hitting that like button. It really helps more people discover these ideas. And if you know someone who's going through a tough time and could use a little dose of ancient strength, please share this video with them. You never know whose day you might change. We all face battles every single day, some big, some small. And while we can't always choose what happens to us, we can choose how we respond. So here is a question for you. What is one thing outside of your control that you're going to try to let go of this week? Share your pledge in the comments below. Let's hold each other accountable and build our inner fortresses together. If you want more stories like this timeless wisdom that can help us navigate modern life, make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And trust me, The next story might just change how you see everything. Thank you and see you in the next video.